For thousands of young people, the prospect of going to school every day and facing their peers makes them terror-stricken. Even social networking on the internet can be a source of ridicule and harassment. Today on Family Matters, a heart-wrenching look at bullying.
Separation and divorce are difficult. You have rights. We fight for them.
Why do people hire family lawyers? The most important reason is to protect their children. I'm John Schumann, the head of the family law group at Devery Smith Frank. Clients also want to protect themselves, protect their finances, and plan for their future. Contact me at 416-446-5847 or at www.deverylaw.ca. We will protect and guide you.
At the Watson Goepel Family Law Group, our focus is to work with our clients to keep costs, conflict, and emotional stress low while trying to achieve favorable legal results. Our lawyers are skilled in traditional family law litigation, but we pride ourselves on promoting innovative, out-of-court options such as mediation, arbitration, collaborative law, and parenting coordination. Your family law issues are unique, and our approach reflects that. Watson Goepel, contact us today.
Recently, there's been a lot of media attention on the topic of bullying. Why has this become such a serious problem? Who's to blame for it? What role do parents, schools, and the community and the media have to play? And how should bullies be dealt with? And most importantly, what can be done to instill in our children the extremely important values of mutual respect, dignity, and compassion? Our first guest is journalist, author, and college professor hank-nuwer. Hank, thanks for being on the show.
Oh, thank you for having me.
You have been examining the issue of bullying since 1978 in the context specifically of hazing and initiation rituals in colleges and university fraternities and sororities, correct?
Correct.
What sparked your interest in that topic?
Well, there was a death at the University of Nevada at Reno when I was a graduate student where I saw two of the initiations where alcohol was poured down somebody, and while I intervened to have them walk the young man in the second case, I didn't report it. They did it a third time. John Davies was taken out to Pyramid Lake and died, and a second pledge had brain damage and later was killed crossing a street in Reno. So at that time I approached human behavior because I wanted to write about the bystander effect with hazing.
And that really launched a career and has made you a world expert on hazing and bullying in general. I think it's important to draw the distinction between regular initiation activities and bullying. When does initiation become bullying?
Well, there's nothing wrong with initiation. When someone gets into a fraternity, it's basically a kind of Masonic rite, which is read and kind of quasi-religious ceremony. But when it gets into hazing, when the real way that the quote-unquote brothers or sisters accept someone to the organization is to put them through shameful, demeaning, and dangerous acts, then it becomes wrong. Because in that particular case, groupthink can take over, and the individual can either wind up wounded with trauma, actually dead because of alcohol or beatings or accidents, or scarred for life because they've given in to a practice that they consider corrupt and shameful.
So it seems to me that the act of initiation into an organization, which is supposed to make you feel included, when the activities that you're putting the person through are actually exploiting them and making them feel excluded, Is that a fair definition of bullying?
Bullying is not to let them into the group in any way, shape, or form. So, for example, at Trumbull High School, when objects were placed in a student's body because he was a special ed student and the football players didn't want him there, there's no hazing there at all. That is pure and simple bullying in its worst form.
And what do you refer to as groupthink? Well, what do you mean by that?
I interviewed in 1978 Irving Janis, who came up with the groupthink theory to explain the Bay of Pigs fiasco. It is the idea that for group solidarity, that you will all agree, you will all come to a conclusion that involves even some dishonesty, and afterwards you will circle the wagons to protect one another. So the groupthink with fraternities, for example, is when they give the exterior of responsible organizations, but behind closed doors, they are walloping pledges or making them drink.
It seems to me that until very recently, universities and colleges turned a blind eye to this. They must have known that this extreme behavior was going on right under their noses, but didn't seem to do anything about it.
Right. My first book came out in 1990, which was called Broken Pledges, and the blowback from university officials was tremendous, and fraternity people. Over the years, it's gotten better, particularly as younger people who've been educated as student affairs professionals get into it. And right now, I'm kind of proud that there's the hank-nuwer Anti-Hazing Award, which is given out by hazingprevention.org, for those institutions or individuals who try to change the system for the better.
I also want to point out you've written 2 other books that I've had the pleasure of reading. One of them is Wrongs of Passage, a harrowing account of some of the activity that takes place in North American colleges and universities. And the other is called The Hazing Reader, also a very disturbing account of what young people find as entertainment and enjoyment in terms of victimizing their peers. They really were very, very disturbing. I want to ask you, what is the connection, do you think, between bullying and binge drinking?
Well, it's a little bit more with hazing and binge drinking, because in a 7-year period, 82% of the cases I tracked where someone died in a hazing incident had alcohol involved. It's a matter of the litmus test for manhood being able to drink a fifth or even more of alcohol. You'd be surprised to know that the deaths have had a blood alcohol content up to 0.52 in a death of Ben Wynn at LSU. That's Louisiana State University in the United States.
You mentioned manhood. Is this strictly a male phenomenon?
No, it is not. In terms of a survey that I was involved with for the NCAA at Alfred University, women were hazing just about as much as men in athletics. The issue is, however, that men take it a lot further, that men are trying to show their masculinity by drinking copious amounts or taking hits with paddles or canes to show that they belong to the organization.
And I would imagine it's not just alcohol. In some cases, there are probably illegal drugs involved as well.
There was at one North Carolina university, the young man told me, "We were a gang, Hank. We were a gang. We had to procure drugs for the gang members as part of it, and cigarettes and alcohol and other things, gifts that were to be given to the older members."
Well, it's pretty clear to me that bullying doesn't just start in college and university. It also can occur much, much younger. We're going to take a break. When we come back, we will return with hank-nuwer and talk about bullying among young children. Stay with us.
Justice Brownstone's wardrobe is provided by D.G. Bremner & Company, a luxury sportswear retailer for men. Visit dgbremner.com.
Separation and divorce are difficult. You have rights. We fight for them.
Hello, I'm Michael James O'Connor. Family law requires sensitivity, flexibility, and confidentiality. The lawyers at McConn & Beon, O'Connor & Peterson are trained to use all avenues available, including alternative dispute resolution, mediation, and litigation. Our family lawyers are equipped to handle your needs in a sensitive and positive way. We can help. Please call.
Welcome back to our discussion of bullying with professor, journalist, and author hank-nuwer. Hank, we've been talking about college situations. What kind of children become bullies?
Well, just like with hazing, those people who's hazed become the hazers often the next year. Sometimes bullies themselves get driven into a point where they get a little bit bigger, or they get a little bit of power, or they want to have some revenge where they become the bullies.
You mean the victim can become the perpetrator?
Oh, for sure. I mean, we're looking at situations such as the Columbine shootings, for example, where the young people who were picked on by athletes and thrown into lockers came back with a rage and a passion that was not seen by anyone, but it was also had grisly, brutal, terrible consequences.
So they'd been on the outside themselves, and they had all this rage, and that was how they manifested it.
Exactly, and we've seen that again and again. And even if we're seeing, someone lying in wait to go after one of the group members or so on, there's a revenge factor there that bothers me.
But why do kids do this to other kids to begin with?
Well, we're all talking about domination here and some aggressiveness, which is natural in a way. That's why we encourage our young people to go into sports. But what's happening here is a power struggle at a very, very early age that I find distressing as a father and grandfather.
But I think it's also anger. I think there's so many kids that have so much anger and rage within them. I certainly see it as a family court judge. Kids who are being exposed to parental conflict. Their parents have separated. There's a custody battle going on. These kids are angry, and they get aggressive.
And they're modeling what they see at home. I mean, I heard a recent story about a young man who went through counseling, heard this last Saturday, about slapping his girlfriend. He said, well, that's what Dad does to my mom. He was genuinely surprised because he had seen it at home.
Some people draw a connection between bullying and fatherlessness, although what you're just saying suggests that if you have a father who is a bully to your mom, you may want to emulate that behavior yourself when you grow up and become a bully.
Sure, but an absentee father is just as bad, in my opinion, because you're looking to television, the media, or your powerful friends who may be bullies for your role model, for the way you behave.
What kinds of kids get bullied?
Often they are kids who are perceived of as gays, maybe a little bit effeminate, haven't really grown into themselves yet, but also super smart kids. There's a tendency for super smart kids to want to downplay what they're doing if they're not
You mean
athletes.
The geeks?
Yeah,
the geeky
geeks.
Kids get bullied? Kids that are perceived as gay get bullied?
Sure, and also students who are hyperactive. The hyperactive students are considered maybe a nuisance, and the teachers themselves may be coming down on them, which opens these young people up for abuse by their peers. If their teachers are treating them that way, why not the group?
Well, I would think that if kids that are perceived as gay are being bullied, this homophobia among the bullies is coming from somebody. What role do parents have to play in all of this?
Well, it's what you hear at home. It might be well-meaning religious people who are talking about being gay being a wrong thing, or as it's perceived, but there are slur words.
That's not well-meaning.
That's
not in my opinion.
How about if we call it not so well-meaning? But the idea of the slurs and the things
I
that
think
would bother
intolerance
us.
of any kind is not well-meaning.
And the thing is, whether it's military being sent over to Vietnam for nicknames or to Afghanistan, the slurs and the names that are invented are not only hurtful, but they tend to make the victim look not like a human being to the group.
You dehumanize the other person.
Exactly.
And kids can be very cruel, and I don't think parents realize that kids are listening to what they say.
Right. It's almost like you just think of a group of reindeer or so where one goes down and the rest are ignoring it. To me, it's also troubling that the bystanders don't step in. When they see someone being bullied and they don't think they have the power or the strength to change it, or think they're the only ones who feel that way, they feel a little bit corrupt and bad about themselves for allowing this to occur, maybe with a special ed kid to move it to another area.
Do you think schools deal with bullying well enough?
I don't think so. I mean, a recent one at Arsenal High School in Indianapolis, which was a very, very tough situation, was where a young man who was openly gay was bullied by a big group of students.
At the school?
At the school.
So what did the school do about it?
The school hadn't done enough, clearly, over time. I mean, it's a big school. That's one of the big problems with these consolidated schools. So what did the mother do? The mother armed her young person with a taser that he then threatened the group with. And for me, the scary part of that, we're thinking of Columbine or Virginia Tech. You don't make a bad situation worse by empowering the victim to then become a victimizer.
I think a lot of parents would say, we've got to teach our kids to fight back. You've got to stand up for yourself.
Yeah, I think there's a difference in self-defense, which is a very positive thing, because along with the teaching of self-defense, you learn honor and respect and boundaries. But to try to have the student, maybe a father says, go punch him out or do something like this, you're just teaching a power struggle that isn't an effective way to handle conflict.
Well, I want to ask you about a personal situation that happened to me as a kid. It happened over and over again. I would get beat up at school. I was bullied badly. I'd go home. My parents would then go to the school and make a big fuss about it. The perpetrators would then get into trouble, and then they retaliated against me worse.
Exactly.
And so I learned, if I tell on them, I'm going to get it worse. So what are you supposed to do?
I think in some ways we have to have the parents, the teachers, the administration, and the community at large acting together to protect the victim. When the victim makes a statement, we have to act and act effectively. In my book, Wrongs of Passage, I talk about tough love. There need to be clear boundaries, but clear consequences for people who are bullies.
I couldn't have said it better myself. Hank, thank you so much for being with us on the show.
Thank you.
When we come back after the break, we will go in chambers and talk about cyberbullying with lawyer Omar-ha-redeye. Stay with us.
People often ask the family lawyers at Devery Smith Frank if we can protect their rights without going to court.
We know how to get people the results they want, through mediation, arbitration, or collaborative law, often without the stress and hostility.
Our full-service firm will protect you, your children, and your finances, in or out of court. Contact us at 416-446-5847 or online at www.deverylaw.ca.
Hello, I'm Michael James O'Connor. Family law requires sensitivity, flexibility, and confidentiality. The lawyers at McConn & Beon, O'Connor & Peterson are trained to use all avenues available, including alternative dispute resolution, mediation, and litigation. Our family lawyers are equipped to handle your needs in a sensitive and positive way. We can help. Please call.
We're in chambers with my next guest, lawyer Omar-ha-redeye, who specializes in internet and social media issues. Omar, thank you for being on the show.
My pleasure, Harvey.
As you know, we've been discussing bullying, and I want to focus with you on cyberbullying. What is cyberbullying?
Cyberbullying, we see all of the type of bullying activity that we saw previously. It's now online, and it can be a very, very powerful tool because of the amount of time that young people spend online these days.
But the bullying aspect of it, what are they doing?
They can be teasing, they can be mocking, they can be pointing fun at people. One of the more insidious ways that we see this happening is they'll create a fake Facebook profile, for example, using the person's real name and using Photoshop pictures of them doing humiliating things.
And then they spread this around to the entire social circle of the young person.
So all the friends, everybody at school, everybody that they know in real life is then making fun of them on this online profile.
Is there a way to know the identity of a person that's doing this?
The problem is that you may have kids who are doing this activity in one city. The company that owns a social media platform is an entirely different city, and then the order that you have to issue against the ISP provider is even sometimes in a different country. So
well, what order are you talking about?
Well, you'd need to get a court order to compel sometimes these companies to provide the IP address or the owner behind the IP address. So the question then becomes, if they're doing it from their home computer, it's very, very easy to identify them. But what happens then if the IP address traces back to the school? Well, we know that it was one of their peers in school anyways, and there's no way, or it's very difficult, to be able to identify which specific student has done this activity.
But this kind of activity has led to very tragic circumstances in some cases.
It has.
In fact, in the news, it seems to be more and more prevalent that we hear of suicides and very serious emotional trauma that's caused because of this embarrassment that you've been talking about. Shouldn't there be some easier way to identify the identity of somebody who is using the internet for what I think is a criminal purpose?
Yeah. Well, one of the things that parents are doing is that they're letting the schools know that this is happening. So it's a good idea to keep a very close mind or close eye on your teens to look for those signs of depression that may be indicative that this type of activity is occurring. What the schools can then do is they can see the Facebook profiles that are being used by people as their personal profiles and then adding to the conversation. So they're laughing and they're saying, ha ha ha, yeah, so-and-so is such a blank, right, and adding to the bullying. They can identify those individuals and pull them in for discipline.
What can parents do to protect their children from this kind of exposure and perhaps even the parent of a bully?
The only thing you can really do is to have a conversation with the children. The reality is that the majority of the bullying actually happens on cell phones, which children are carrying with them at all times. And so it's very difficult for those parents to monitor the use of those cell phones.
But it seems to me that there need to be boundaries, there needs to be some reinforcement of negative behavior with some kind of sanction that prevents children from using these technology instruments, if you will, to victimize other kids.
There should be, and I think part of that is that our legal systems and our school boards are becoming increasingly aware of the seriousness of this activity, and so they are tightening it up. The parents themselves, though, again, it comes down to communication, just need to be able to express to their children how they should not be encouraging this behavior and hopefully not initiating it themselves.
And if kids are using computers at school, you said, for improper purposes, can the schools do something to limit the way in which the computer is being used or the internet part of it is being used?
Certainly. So a lot of schools are then blocking social media platforms like Facebook or Twitter. I don't know if that's necessarily the solution. What's probably a more focused approach is to require login. So when students log into their actual computer using a specific account, if there is some inappropriate activity that occurs, they can trace it back to a specific student.
What about the social media sites themselves, like Facebook? Do they take any responsibility? Can they take action?
They try to give as little responsibility as possible or claim as little responsibility as possible because they say if there is any kind of bullying activity occurring, let us know immediately. So there are ways you can flag certain posts and flag certain things to say, look, this is inappropriate. And so that's their way of saying, look, it's up to you as a parent or as a child that if you see this type of thing happening, let us know so we can take it down right away and minimize the type of impact this potentially could have on a child.
From what you know, has that been happening? Are they responsive and will they take it down?
It does happen. It happens all the time. I think one of the examples that we're seeing now is that when someone dies, for example, their Facebook account can live on. And so there's been the cyberbullying where students will actually say that one of their colleagues has died and will notify Facebook pretending to be a family member, and so Facebook will then deactivate the account and send out a message saying this person has died. You can imagine the shock and trauma that occurs to everybody who's connected with that individual then. So they are tightening things up, and there are ways that you can push back in terms of the cyberbullying, but again, it comes down to the parents and to the children themselves taking responsibility to make sure this doesn't happen.
Well, the courts have recently, in numerous jurisdictions, entered into this discussion and made it clear that cyberbullying is a very serious thing that can have very serious consequences legally, including damages.
Exactly. So you can actually have the parents of children paying money to the parents of another children for the psychological trauma that's inflicted on them. So there can be significant legal consequences, and it's important for parents to remember that.
Well, there's a very important point that I think every parent should be aware of. You can be out of pocket financially if you are found to be liable for damage that your child causes to someone else. On that note, I'm going to thank you very much for being on our show.
My pleasure, Justice Brownstone.
When it's hard to meet or even talk together, put the power of computer software and trained negotiators to work for you. Lawyers, mediators, and families can harness Smart Settle software to produce high-value agreements for separation, estate, and elder care. Smart Settle software can help parties reach an agreement worth 10 to 20% more value for everyone. Get connected, get smart, get settled. Learn more right now at smartsettlefamily.com. It can be difficult to talk with family about estate planning at the best of times. Many families don't talk enough about the issues they face, such as remarriage or the family business.
Hi, I'm Jim Doyle. I help navigate the complexities of today's modern family when it comes to integrating your investment and legacy planning needs. Wouldn't it be nice to see your professional advisors speaking to you with a common voice?
When protecting your legacy is important, ask how Jim Doyle and Investors Group can help.
I'm Lauren McLean. Today in Q&A, our question is, my spouse and I just separated, and I want to use our frozen embryos to get pregnant, but he disagrees. Who wins? Assisted reproductive technology has brought joy to many infertile couples, but it's also created emotional disputes over what happens to those frozen embryos that the parties intended to use to have children when the parties divorce. The law is clear that this type of dispute is not a child custody case, but rather it's a property division case. Frozen embryos are very special kinds of property with life potential and are obviously entitled to the highest respect. I call the frozen embryos potential persons in waiting. The judge deciding your embryo dispute will use a balancing test that takes into account your spouse's right not to be forced to have a baby after divorce against your right to have that child. Some judges have decided that the embryos should be destroyed unless using them is the only way for you to have a child. But still others have said that the embryos should remain frozen until you and your spouse can agree on what to do with them.
Thanks for watching. For extended interviews and exclusive content, please visit our website at familymatterstv.com. If you'd like to submit your legal question to our Q&A, go to advicescene.com. I'm Justice Harvey Brownstone. See you next time.